You talk about meta thinking in terms of you start off talking about structural thinking, and then you move on to process thinking, and then you move on to relational thinking, and finally transformative. Can you explain what these areas mean and how they help you to become a better thinker, an accomplished meta thinker?
Well, I've already said a little bit about this, because I talked about things always being part of a bigger whole. And structural thinking is all about seeing the bigger picture, if you like. And seeing things in terms of having a particular structure is basically saying the way we look at the world is that things are often stacked up in hierarchies. There's often an order to things that you can see. If you look at the rings of a tree, for example, in the trunk of a tree, or look at strata in rock, for example, you can see levels of things. And so structural thinking is applying that concept that everything is kind of ordered in a particular structure. And although we might look at something as a completely separate entity, it is actually part of a bigger structure. It's just that you don't necessarily see it. And when people appreciate that things are part of a bigger structure, they start to see that you can actually see it from different angles, that there might be different perspectives to appreciate, and the way they're looking at it is just one particular perspective. So there may be different perspectives that they could see. Does that cover enough on structural thinking?
Yes, it does. And the process thinking?
Well, process thinking is simply the idea that whether we like it or not, everything is always in some kind of movement. And you might say, well, yeah, I get it that, you know, we as live human beings, we're always growing a bit or shrinking a bit, or, you know, losing some skin or creating some new skin and stuff like that. But when you look out there, there's a rock. That's not changing at all. Well, actually, the rock is changing because the rock will be subject to erosion. The wind will gradually whittle some of that rock away. You may not be able to see it or notice it, but that rock is changing. The pebble on the beach, it's being washed by the waves. It's gradually changing its shape. It's probably becoming rounder and rounder, smaller and smaller. Eventually it will get ground down into sand. So everything out in the world is changing. And when we start applying that in terms of our thinking, we realize that actually what we're not looking at static objects, we're looking at things that are moving, and they're moving in a certain direction, and we better pay attention to that. Otherwise, we'll miss that. We won't understand that people are always changing.
And relational thinking?
Relational thinking is a little bit more difficult. The principle is very simple, but it is to say that everything is always connected. And not only that, that connection is often what makes those things what they are. Simple example, a man and a woman. Well, if there's no women, there wouldn't be any point in talking about a man. And if there was no man, there wouldn't be any point in talking about a woman. So the woman and man are connected. They're separate. We think about them separately. but they're intimately connected because they influence each other in being what they are. And relational thinking is about thinking everything is like that in one way or another.
And transformational thinking.
Well, transformational thinking is pretty much the combination of all three. When things are part of a bigger whole, when they're part of that structure, and when they're always shifting, and when they're always relating or in relationship to something else, then they're going to transform eventually. And transformation here is more significant than change, because change is movement within a form. Transformation is movement through forms. And if you think about human beings, well, we transform throughout our lives. We start as embryos, we become babies, we grow into children and then teenagers and then adults. And sadly, we eventually grow old and decay and die. So we're in transformation.
Yeah, constant change there.
Yeah.
Thank you.